Let me introduce tonight's speakers. It's going to be a fun session tonight. We have 4 different speakers who are going to give us 4 different examples of virtual reality and augmented reality and how this powerful new technology is changing the face not only of things like gaming and entertainment, but perhaps more importantly, things like education and training for all kinds of applications. So our first honored speaker and guest tonight is Timoni West, and Timoni is the director of XR research at Unity Labs, which is a global VR imaging and gaming company headquartered in San Francisco. Timoni manages a team of cross-disciplinary artists and engineers. Her group explores how humans can create and live in worlds that exist in virtual and augmented reality. She will describe how VR and AR tools are now available to everybody, giving the opportunity to talented artists and engineers to build their own applications for space exploration and much more than that. So we'll start with Timoni giving us some examples of what's happening at Unity Labs, and come and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm Timoni West, and I lead XR research, which is just a short way of saying augmented, virtual, and mixed reality research at Unity Labs. How many of you have heard of Unity before? Okay, so about half the room. For the other half of you, Unity is a 3D game engine that is used to make many, many different kinds of games, and now much more different types of experiences, especially for augmented and virtual reality. We're used to make about 60% of all mobile games. You likely have a game on your phone that's made with Unity. But we've also been used from everything from visualizations at CERN to educational programs. If you need to create a digital world, Unity is a great way to get in quickly and be able to make something very easily. The labs team is focused heavily on how Unity will be used over the next 5 to 10 years. So rather than tell you about it, I'm going to show you a little video that goes over some of the projects that we're working on for 2018. Okay. I think there's sound too, if we could. No sound. Okay, so this is Editor XR. This is an open source extension to Unity that you can download today. If you have a Vive or a Rift, you can literally go into your world or into your scene view and edit the scene directly in virtual reality. Even if you're making something as simple as a 2D card game, you can do it in virtual reality with this tool. This is a prototype of an animation tool where you can actually animate the motion splines. Playing around with mobile AR as a window into virtual worlds. Then we're also pushing the limits on how we can display humans in real-time rendering. This is our advanced graphics research team. They do a lot of white paper work. It's okay. Machine learning, behavior planning, figuring out how we can make better non-player characters for video games so you don't have to animate them, you don't have to tell them what to do, instead they can just do things automatically. Same with animation. We have mocap libraries that we use to generate new patterns for non-player characters or regular characters to move around in more human ways. And then we do prototypes and concepts around how people will interact in the future when they have wearable devices. Fun fact, this looks really cool, but we did it all with ARKit and just shot it through the phone. So a lot of the work we do is thinking about what will happen when digital worlds and the physical world can collide, and not only what will we be building, but what should Unity look like when that future comes to pass. This is an example of another virtual reality project that we made. This one is Unity is kind of complicated. It has a lot of different things for professionals. So we wanted to explore how you could make tools for people who have never made a game in their lives, never made a world in their lives. What are the types of experiences they would need to have? VR in general is a little bit hard to get into. The controllers are unusual. So how could we make experiences that got everyone to good very quickly? So we call this a Project Carte Blanche, and it was designed to let anyone be able to make a level very, very quickly. A lot of people ended up trying this. We're actually going to release it in the fall, and it was a very successful prototype. We also made a toolkit for developers. So if you wanted to, for example, have different ways of locomoting around your space or different ways of interacting with objects so you could limit rotation and so on, we created an open source toolkit. So you can actually just download this and get started making your world. And we kind of wanted to give the basics to you. So if you didn't want to have to reinvent the equivalent of the scroll wheel in VR, you could just use this tool. All right, I think I already showed this one. I'm not sure that came back. All right, and I'm going to watch or play the whole of this video. I don't have too much time, but I think this is a really interesting example of how we can use the technology of today tomorrow when it is more advanced and we have wearable devices. So I'll let you watch this part. Normally there's some nice music playing, but unfortunately we don't have it right now. So if you don't work in this space, you might not know this, but there is no hardware that is available today that will let you have this. We posted this on Twitter, and a lot of people got very excited. But unfortunately, all of the AR wearables today are illuminated, so there's nothing truly opaque. But this goes through how you could make an experience like this. So almost all of the technologies that were just mentioned are not available in consumer devices in any sort of substantial way at this stage. There are new headsets coming out, like the Magic Leap headset that will have robust eye tracking. Often it's considered a one-off, but we're trying to envision what people will want to build so that way we can build the tools now so that they're ready when the hardware catches up. So that's mainly what I wanted to talk about today. Our focus for this year is on how we're going to make a Unity extension that lets you make really robust tools for augmented and mixed reality when people are wearing headsets. If you can imagine us all sitting in the room, and I've decided it's Star Wars themed, so you're all wearing Stormtrooper outfits, and one of you has chosen the Harry Potter theme, one of you has decided everyone's going to look like a lion for some reason. What does that future look like? How do we get everyone there? How do we track them? What technologies do we need? So one of the things that we discovered that is fundamentally different than any other type of digital development today is that there is a mix between what the computer knows about the world and what you can build. So for example, if you're creating a game, or even if you're working in virtual reality today, you know the position of every single object in that space because it's all generated and defined by the computer. This is not the case with augmented and mixed reality. Instead, you need to have experiences that are adaptable to the world, and you need to have a lot of information about the world that comes into the computer so the computer knows what to do. And it also has to be extremely flexible as a result. So if you want to have a game that can work in this room and a game that can work in the lobby, you need to have things that are procedural and generative, and you need to be able to define the limitations of those so that it can work in any space. And this is no small feat. This takes a lot of thinking. You need to be able to test. You need to be able to go to a variety of different spaces and test it out. Unfortunately, we have not perfected teleportation yet, so actually going to spaces to try this out is very difficult and was one of our big challenges. Machine learning, obviously, that's something that comes up a lot that can help, but the fact is we are really in some level really early stages of machine learning. The data sets are not widely available, and when they are, they tend to be proprietary and owned by specific platforms. And they also tend to be device specific. You know, you can have machine learning on the GPU, but then it tends to be tied to one platform stack and also one particular hardware manufacturer. So this is where we're at so far. This is Unity, and this is a really silly face mask that we made in Unity. And this is something that I think people are familiar with. When most people think of augmented reality today, they think of silly face masks on Snap or Facebook, right? How many of you have tried a silly face mask at some point? Right, okay, a lot of you. So we want to meet, this seems really simple and it doesn't even seem like augmented reality, but we do want to meet people where they are today. And most augmented reality, for better or for worse, takes the shape of silly little dog ears on your face. So we wanted to make sure that we got this in so people can start to work with that. But we think that there's a lot more interesting stuff out there. So we have started to create simulation views so that you can test how you're going to lay out your scene or your game across a variety of different rooms. We just made like 100 rooms, and you can just go through and test, and you can flexibly place your objects, say like look for a plane of a minimum size or a maximum size. We call this flexible design. We're basically telling you, or we're telling the computer, try to find the best available space and put it there, and then put everything else where it makes sense from here. And these are game objects, but we know that this is going to be essential when it comes to the future, and you are looking at your Netflix app in your living room, and then you want your Netflix app to follow you into the kitchen and place itself on the wall. This is crucial to having spatial computing that makes sense, that isn't annoying, and that works consistently. So here's an example. This is going to seem fairly simple, but this is oddly one of the most robust mobile AR apps that exist today. This is a multi-plane, I think it's 6 different planes working in one of our developers' backyards. He worked all night to get this done. It's just an example of once the computer knows more about the world, you can start to create experiences that can be larger and more robust and more flexible than anything that you can build today. And here's another quick example. This is an example of what we call terraining, where we can actually see the space, and as we find planes, this is just using ARKit, we start to cleverly place things like procedural bridges, procedural characters. So you tap on her and she can jump around, jump on the ground, and now she's going to climb up on the other side. And I know this seems quite simple, but honestly, this is, again, one of the more complicated mobile AR experiences that you can have today. And we want people to make a lot more of this and make it a lot more awesome. So that's what my team is working on now. And if you're interested in talking more, or if you're actively working in the space, please reach out. Especially if you're working in wearables, we're very interested in bringing that forward to the future. So thanks very much.
All right, so that's a pretty cool sample and example of some of the technologies that are being developed, and I think you can just imagine what the future is like as these roll out. But what I'm particularly interested in here is this notion that, you know, now this opens up this AR, VR world in terms of developing environments to people who are not developers. You know, so like me, for example. So that's pretty exciting. All right, for our next act, I would like to introduce Amaresh Kalapara, who is most famous for being a trustee of the SETI Institute, of course, but he's also an Emmy-nominated VR producer and space industry executive with a technology and business background. He recently led a project called Mission ISS, or Mission International Space Station, at Facebook's VR company Oculus. This project was conducted in collaboration with NASA, and it's true-to-life simulation of the International Space Station in VR. Amaresh will discuss new VR use cases being developed by NASA, the European Space Agency, and other agencies. He will explain how various agencies, research centers, and companies are using VR and AR technologies to visualize massive amounts of data and communicate space themes with the general public. With that, Amaresh, take it away.
Thank you, Bill, for the kind introduction. We're going to do a quick AV switch. We're smartly using 3 laptops tonight. So always minimize your risk profile when presenting, and we thought, heck with that. So as Bill mentioned, I'm going to discuss several topics today. And the first and foremost is my experience with an area called what I would classify as VR in space. But before we do that, looks like it's working. Before we do that, I wanted to show you my favorite TV commercial of all time. And here's a hint, it has something to do with VR. So let me bring that up. And I just want to make sure we have sound, so let's see if that works. The fundamental thing around VR is that it allows you to go where you cannot go, to be somewhere or be someone that you cannot necessarily be. And that premise of virtual reality will eventually revolutionize education, revolutionize various business applications, and it already is revolutionizing the gaming and entertainment industry. And so my interest areas are around education and around business applications, which we'll touch upon today a little bit. So without further ado, let me show you if I can get this to work. My official favorite commercial, and a lot of you may have seen this before.
Packed my bags last night, pre-flight. 0 hour, 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be high as a kite by then. It's lonely out of space.
I love that commercial because what it's very simplistic, of course, but the essence of virtual reality, especially the essence of VR crossed with the space industry, is that it takes you places VR does, and AR as well, that you cannot possibly go. And pretty much by definition, the last frontier where pretty much everyone in the room, everyone that you do know, will probably never go in the foreseeable future in real life is space. But we can go there virtually, and we can accomplish a lot of pertinent tasks along with education with VR. And so Bill mentioned that I used to work at Oculus, and one of the things that we did at Oculus is work with the European Space Agency to send an Oculus Rift, one of these, to the ISS. And so one of these is aboard the International Space Station right now. And what application is it performing, you may wonder? It's actually doing what I would call something related to medical testing for astronauts. So I'm going to show you a quick video from the European Space Agency. They led the effort in getting this up there. And if any of you have experience in getting hardware above the space station, it definitely is not easy. It's exponentially harder for technology that NASA generally has never really used before. And so it was not an easy task, but we're glad we got it up there. the European Space Agency got it up there. So I'm going to show you a quick video, and I'll fast forward through this. But it's basically how astronauts are using the headset now to essentially test vestibular balance testing, as well as peripheral vision and grabbing sensations in microgravity. So in essence, it has to do with medical/vestibular training in microgravity. And it's called the GRASP experiment. And so what this astronaut is doing right now is doing a peripheral vision test. You can see the computer on the right side of the screen there, showing some of the visuals that he is viewing through the headset. To date, it's still the only VR headset up there. There's also an AR headset up there. The HoloLens is up on the ISS. And so let's now dive in to show you a glimpse of the ISS virtually. And so Mission ISS is a simulation produced by Oculus and Facebook. I'm proud to say that it actually is the first space-related experience in VR that was nominated for an Emmy Award last year. And you'll get to see this in real life. So let's see if this works. All right, looks like we have liftoff. Nice. Perfect. So here are my hands. Hello, everyone. What's this way? There we go. Hello. And by the way, this actually was made in Unity. So Timoni, thank you. Unity is awesome. So very good. It actually worked really well. We're proud to have used that. The development team that created this is called Magnopus, one of the key partners of Oculus and Facebook. They're based down in Los Angeles. I'm going to give you a very preliminary look of this. For those of you who want to see more or want to learn more, come and see me afterwards. This is a free application on the Oculus Store. All you need is the headset that I'm using now and a computer that can drive the headset. And I can tell you more about that afterwards. And so this experience was developed in collaboration with NASA and ESA and SpaceX. And 15 astronauts gave us their constructive feedback. But as you can see, it's full motion. You can grab onto the hold bars or grab bars, just like astronauts do in space. You could have food fights, just like astronauts do as well in space. We're going to do a very quick tour, and I'll show you one of the coolest places on the ISS is the toilet. This is the $20 million toilet right there. And and by the way, we actually had several astronauts help us, including Suni Williams. So here she is actually in space in the same location, describing one of the key locations on the ISS. And we'll go down into the cupola area, the main window of the ISS. I'll go ahead and flip my orientation over. You can see the Earth above us there. The cupola is kind of the central area for conducting docking when it's not automated. There's a Canada arm right there. And I will show you very quickly here, if I can group out. I'm going to show you a quick concept of a capsule docking that SpaceX helped us with.
Approach the controls and we'll guide you through the procedure.
The Dragon capsule is right there.
Now that you're at the controls, you'll
But anyway, these
see monitors
joysticks
showing a
will
view from
allow
your external
any user
cameras.
to actually move
Joysticks
the
in front
Canada
of you will
arm to
control
dock
the
the
remote
capsule
manipulator
and bring it to
system,
the
or
ISS.
RMS, which is the main robotic arm.
The controls,
The RMS is attached.
the controls are true to life. Several astronauts have kind of confirmed and helped us develop the translational joystick here on the left and the rotational joystick here on the right. Docking is done in an automated fashion now, but just in case, every now and then, there may have to be a manual docking, so astronauts do train. We work closely, and a shout out to the VR lab at NASA JSC. They helped us tremendously on this project. They conduct training for astronauts. Most astronauts who go to the ISS, at least on the NASA side, go through that VR lab. And we are proud to have worked with them closely on this. Before I show you one more item, I'm actually going to take you outside the space station. So let's do a spacewalk, shall we? And by the way, when you head to space, never leave home without your trusty iPad. So here we are. We can do this by the book, which is generally a tethered spacewalk around the perimeter of the ISS, hand over hand, never letting go at any given time. Or we can do this Hollywood style, which I think we shall, and we're going to go that way. Don't try this at home. And this is not a NASA-approved sport, but I call this ISS solar panel surfing. But it truly gives you a sense of how big the ISS is. It's quite a monumental feat that we've collaborated with several nations to put this up in space, and I hope it goes strong.
ISS, this is Mission Control at Johnson. You've gone too far from the station. If you're looking for something, it's not in that direction.
All right, thank you, Amresh. I can tell you from my own experience, the VR experience on the International Space Station is quite awesome, especially going outside, and especially letting go of the handrails. I think I was last seen over Zimbabwe when I did this, but it's great fun. It's really amazing. Actually, for some people, it's a little disorienting, and you can get a little bit dizzy. I mean, you are totally immersed in that environment when you have the headset on. But if you can handle that, it's really quite an amazing experience. And I think you can see from some of the examples that Amara showed, the potential power of these tools for education, for training, et cetera. So let me introduce our next speaker, who is J.R. Skok. J.R. is a planetary scientist with the SETI Institute, so he's one of ours. His research is focused on exploring the deep history of Mars and Earth in the field of astrobiology, or the study of life beyond Earth. J.R. is also the scientific advisor for a company called Astro Reality. This is a company that is developing topographically precise planetary models that are paired with augmented reality technology for education and science outreach. So J.R. will demonstrate the power of combining the limitless potential of AR with tangible handheld artifacts to understand space like never before. J.R.
Thank you all. And that last talk was, I think, a good kind of direction into some of the powers of showing Earth data sets and planetary data sets that can be applied to actual real-life models that you can hold in your life. With all the data we have, Google Earth and VR models like that on the moon of Earth, it's great to have all that data. There's so much being produced by satellites, by modelers, by all the things. And the question is, how do you get that to fit into a world where you can understand, where you can have it make sense to your brain? And so that's what Astro Reality is trying to do. Is let's see, we can play this. It was up. This one? Okay. It was up on both. So what we're trying to do with Astro Reality is let you explore these planets in your hand. So we're making these topographically precise, these models. The topography is a bit exaggerated on the moon and other planets, so you can actually feel it. At this scale, real topography is a bit too smooth, but it's all scaled to the same level, and you can feel this is a model of the moon. All these are available out front if you actually want to feel them in your hands, and that's what this is really meant to be, is felt in your hands, and then apply the AR to it. So by teaming up with the AR and these models, we can create an educational experience that lets you explore these in a way where you can feel it. So by matching the topographic models with AR, it allows you to really feel these features. So on the moon, you can feel the cratered highlands hitting the smooth mare of the volcanic fields, and then use AR to identify features, overlay all the different data sets that we have. So right now, this is one of our main products is this moon. There's also a variety of other products from moons to the solar system to, let's see if that can play. There's a little movie there that's going to be supposed to be a book, but you can see that all out front as the demo. We're also going to be creating a Earth under development. So the model you can already feel out front, and all the different data sets that we just saw before virtually, you can now overlay on an actual physical globe. So how does the weather, you can see weather maps, geology, plate tectonics, animal tracks, all the human ecosystem events, but then have it also exist on a topographic model what the Earth is like. So how does weather change when you hit mountain ranges or oceans? You can actually feel that in your hands, the topographic features of a planet, and then see the data sets as they all link up. So it provides both a tactile, real-life experience of a planet and a planetary perspective with the unlimited potential of the data sites that we can do with AR. And the best thing I like about it is that it's continuously updatable. So every time the scientists have a new discovery, every time there's a new mission to the moon, a new data set on Earth, new information from satellites, we can add that to the AR app and experience it in something that's real and tangible in your hands. And compared to VR, AR is sociable. So you can share this with your friends, feel it around with your family. It works well with students who actually want to feel something real. And by combining these powers, you can really just enhance that learning experience and explore the planets in your hands. So I won't spend too much time demonstrating this because it's much better to see when you're actually holding the globes. So after the talk, come on up, hold the moon, hold Earth, and see what the AR can do. Thank you.
All right, thank you, JR. So, that's a good example of what happens when you combine both physical things, tangible things that you can hold that are actually in front of you, really in front of you, with augmented reality environments or virtual reality environments. And we're actually partnering with Astro Reality to create a nice display at the SETI Institute, taking advantage of some of their technology. So one of the things that's difficult to project for people is the understanding of scale. When you start talking about the size of the universe or the size of planets, the relative size of planets, information about our solar system. So Astro Reality was asked to create, and they agreed to create, a series of these beautiful, again, hand-painted, handcrafted planets to scale of the planets in our solar system, which will be on display at the Institute. And imagine now the ability to take a device like a tablet or a mobile phone and then just scan it over the physical model that's in front and be taken to that environment to see, for example, research that we've participated on with NASA and programs like Cassini or New Horizons or the Curiosity rover, for example. So information and science and data can pop up as you interact with these physical models. And just to give you an idea, the physical model of Saturn is about that big, a little smaller than a basketball, bigger than a softball. And Earth is about that big. They shipped us a box with the planets in it, and we had a nice Saturn and a nice Jupiter and a little Uranus and a little Neptune. And then there was a little box, and you open the little box, and all the rest of the planets were inside. So for those of us, particularly in Silicon Valley, who sometimes get ahead of ourselves and we get a big head thinking we are really it, you see this model and you think, man, we're just not so big after all. But anyway, so we're very happy to be collaborating with Astro Reality and the work that JR is doing. JR does a lot of his field research in places like Iceland and volcanoes. So imagine, for example, being able to visit that environment virtually just by taking a look at a model of planet Earth and taking yourself to that location. So these things are coming. Last but not least, let me introduce to you Franck Marchis. Franck is a senior planetary astronomer at the SETI Institute and chief scientific officer at Unistellar, which is a French company revolutionizing amateur astronomy. Franck is also a scientific advisor for the French company VR2 Planets. They specialize in creating accurate environments from space-based and drone or rover data to help scientists explore and understand planets and other bodies in our solar system. A multi-user demo which places users on the surface of Mars, made from actual Curiosity rover data combined with space satellite data, so we're talking about high-resolution image data, will be featured this evening. Franck will discuss the potential of VR to support scientific investigations, exploration, and discovery. Franck, take it away.
Can you hear me? Yeah? All right, good. All right, so I'm going to demo today the work we've been doing with VR2 Planets. As Bill mentioned, it's a French company located in Nantes. And the goal of VR2 Planet is to basically create an accurate environment in virtual reality that people can use, especially scientists, to discuss, to interact. So today I'm going to do a demo of one of the environments that we have been developing for Mars specifically, and we're going to go on Mars together. So first of all, let's make sure that I put this properly on my head. Here I am. Yes, good. So the CNES, oh, sorry for that. Technical problem. Glasses. 2 glasses. Who let me come here with 2 glasses on my head? I don't know. All right, anyway. So the CNES have been asked via 2 planets to create an environment of Mars to be able to navigate and walk on Mars. So first we're going to go on the... okay, it's not working. It's working. So here I am in a station, virtual station located on Mars. And as you can see, I have a computer here. I even have magazine. I can even grab them and touch and turn the pages and see here the picture of the president of the CNES. I don't know why they put that here. Play ball with the gravity of Mars, of course. But more interestingly, we have this table here, which is basically a virtual table. I could walk around, but the cable is not long enough and the space is very limited, and we wanted to make sure I'm not going to fall, because you never know with me. So this is a very interesting area of Mars. Some of you may recognize it. It's basically the Gale crater. The Gale crater is a crater formed 3.5 billion years ago from an impact. You have a central peak here in the middle. Sorry. I can use this. I can turn this map, make it bigger as well. Of course, it was working a few minutes ago, but it's not working now. Oh, sorry. But you can see the topology. You can see the central peak, which is 4-kilometer altitude. But instead of just looking at this, let's go outside. Let's see what we have outside the station. It's not this way. It's here. Bill, you should have said that I'm completely jet lagged, but that's okay. So I'm opening the airlock, walking. I'm closing the airlock. The pressure is going to change, going from Earth's atmosphere to Mars atmosphere, and the door's going to open. So what you're seeing now, it's basically a view of Mars, combining data from the orbiters with data from the rovers. And you can see that there is some rover data because we have here the track of the tire of the rover. I'm talking about the Curiosity rover. I'm going all the way on the top of this, so you can see the habitat. It's a virtual habitat developed by the CNES. Here you can see the cliff of the crater and the summit of the Gale crater. So I have this watch here. This watch is useful not to see the time, but to move to another environment. Let's use this one called Nekluft. So I'm being teleported in this new environment. Once again, it's an accurate environment. We have here an accuracy of a few centimeters on the floor. You can see the irregular floor. You can see that some area is made like if there was liquid water here. We know that there was liquid water on the surface of the crater 3 billion years ago. And there is this red button here, which of course is not really on Mars. It's something we put for activating something. Something coming out. Coming on toward me. Let's move slightly, please. You don't want to crush a French guy in the middle of a show. Here. So I'm very tall on this simulation, but what you can see here is the inside lander, which has been launched in May from California. and going to land on the surface of Mars. Let me turn this way. In November 2018. So the rover is basically use the same technology that the Phoenix rover. He has this kind of superflex solar panels to get energy from the sun. It's located in the equator. It's going to be located on the equator in an area called Elysium Planitia. So this rover is very interesting because it's going to deploy using this arm a seismometer. The seismometer is protected from the wind using this chamber, vacuum chamber. And it's also going to deploy the mole. Let me move away from the mole. So this animation, this application has been done for the CNES because I wanted to be able to explain to the public how this rover is going to work and what it's going to do. So let me show you this on an experiment. Once again, a virtual experiment. So I got this hammer here, which looked like a typical hammer that people use when they want to break rocks or listen to rocks. And we're going to be listening to Mars. So if I bang with my hammer on the crust of Mars, this is a virtual Mars, you see the propagation of the waves here. And this is what the seismometer will basically receive as a data. So if I bang close to the seismometer, you see that the waves are stronger. I can also simulate meteor impact here and here. I'm going to put a lot of meteors in this area, okay? So it's visible on the diagram. So you can hear, but there is also the sound of Mars vibrating. So the goal of this mission is to derive the internal composition of Mars, being able to measure as well the temperature of the deep interior. This mole is going to dig 5 meters under the crust and basically take measurement every 10 centimeters, giving us information on the formation of Mars and its internal structure. I could show you more words, but we don't have an infinite amount of time. Maybe just for fun, the ExoMars, which is the next European mission, rover, which is going to be launched in a few years. I just want to show you what it will look like. Be patient. Hopefully it's not crashing. Here it is. Again, the button. So you can see how the rover is going to deploy from its passerelle here after landing. This is the solar panels. So this is an interesting and important rover because it's going to be capable of taking samples and analyze the samples using different types of experiments. One of them is Raman spectroscopy, and we hope to be able to derive, to see if there was some trace of life from the past of Mars. Okay, I'm going to stop here and let this run for a few minutes while we transition to the discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, so if I could get our speakers up here, we're going to spend a few minutes just in a panel discussion with a little Q&A and open forum, and then we'll open the floor mic up for those of you who might have questions. It's interesting because it's pretty clear with these virtual reality headsets that when you have the headset on or when you're handling it, you have no appreciation for what people are seeing who are in an audience where things are moving around and you're starting to get dizzy and sick and the scientist doesn't know it. But anyway, and I'm going to tell you something else just for fun here because when you're the CEO of a place like the SETI Institute, your opportunity for correcting a scientist is essentially non-existent. But I have the opportunity tonight because Frank has referred to these last two objects on Mars as rovers when in fact they're landers, not rovers, because they're not going anywhere. They're just going to... But so there's my first and maybe my last opportunity ever in the history of the SETI Institute to correct one of our scientists, because it'll never happen again. But in any case, so what he showed you, the InSight rover, or the lander, see, he's got me doing it. The InSight lander is on its way to Mars. It will arrive in November. It did launch this year from Vandenberg, and it's an exciting project. And so that virtual reality experience is pretty neat. So I'm going to grab, let's see if this mic can be made to work. Yes, all right. Okay, so I'm going to join the team here. And so we did a little bit today with augmented reality. And I'd like to see if we could get our panelists to talk about the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. Amresh, I know you and I have had this conversation before that surprisingly, in spite of the power of VR, it hasn't taken off the way I think companies and organizations have expected it might. And I'm wondering whether that part of that may be just the user technology interface, if you will, compared to augmented reality where you're not going to worry about falling off the edge of a stage, for example, if you use it. What are the things that, what are the advantages and disadvantages and distinctions between AR and VR, and what are your different views on making these technologies becoming just more ubiquitous? You want to start?
Sure. It's a question that I think about every day because it kind of impacts the startup that we're working on and the hardware that we're kind of working on as well. So simply put, as most of you know, all of you know, virtual reality transplants your current reality 100%. You're taken to the surface of Mars without any semblance of where you are physically right now in the real world. You're transplanted onto the ISS, as you saw earlier. Augmented reality, just by its name, is an augmentation or a mixing of both. It's a hybrid reality, if you will, a reality that is both somewhat artificial but placed upon the canvas of reality. And I see AR developing much faster and in a more ubiquitous fashion than VR because of the hardware. All of you can do AR basically on your smartphones today, and it's actually quite easy to do. There are Unity plugins as well that allow you to do something very, very quick and also very easy, but extremely compelling. So the main differentiator right now is that the hardware for AR versus VR, you already have AR hardware in your pocket. VR hardware is a little bit more cumbersome because most of you do not necessarily have a headset. Maybe folks in the room do, but the general public don't have necessarily a headset and a powerful gaming computer to run that headset for VR. So as we fast forward down the road, technology adoption is going to be a key determinant on how these industries kind of play out. But they coincide and go hand in hand with content development. The industries that we're talking about, AR and VR, wouldn't be anywhere without novel content. So it's kind of a combination of both.
Timoni, what do you think?
So, am I on? Yeah, okay. As we've been exploring augmented reality over the last few years, I definitely have grown to appreciate just how little computers know about the real world and how incredibly difficult it is trying to get computers to understand what's actually happening. And you need computers to understand what's happening in every space to have augmented reality work the way that you think it should work. By which I mean, if you want to have a digital ball bounce on a stage, you've got to scan the room, you've got to generate a mesh, and then you have to have that mesh maintain the same position by either feeding into the camera feed or having external cameras if you have a wearable device on. That's no small feat. Like, that is the kind of thing that I'm friends with the 6D guys, and they just released meshing like on Monday. So there are companies that have been doing this for a while. HoloLens has had meshing for years. The Vive Pro has meshing, but it's not in real time. But every single device that you have, that you wear, that allows you to interact and mix together digital and real world objects is going to need to have this kind of technology, or it's going to need to license it. And the amount of compute power needed for this, the amount of machine learning that we still need to do on this is astronomical. So I think we're getting there, and the phones are kind of a nice little halfway point. I actually think phones are most useful now because they're capturing data that we can use to feed back into more robust wearable devices, but we're still just like the baby stages. And I kind of thought we were further along than we were when we started, but there is no industry I know of that is so fragmented where there are so many overlapping capabilities, but not all of the capabilities, as in the world of computer vision, getting computers to understand what is happening in the real world. Because this goes from everything from the meshing that I mentioned in optics to things like, what's the temperature outside today? Who are you? You know, and how to identify who you are. Facial recognition, eye tracking, voice recognition, like all of the different things that make up all of the sensors and experiences that we have in the world. We need to get a computer to not only get that data, but then make sense of it. And that's a really big challenge.
Jared, you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree with all that. You know, it's amazing seeing the just leaps that technology is making. You know, every time a new phone comes out, like the processing power is much more advanced. So just the natural progression of computing, I think, is just going to give a lot more powerful tools to make those challenges happen. And I think, you know, there is a big problem with the fragmentation of it, like especially AR. There's right now we make Astro Reality app for the phones, and everyone wants to get those on AR glasses. But there's so many different AR glasses, and it's that whole like VHS Betamax, like which one's going to win? Like which one do you want to spend the time actually figuring out the architecture? Are they all going to take the same input for all the different companies? Like that is a big challenge, I think, for developers to figure out which of the future technologies is worth building for.
Yeah.
And so
Do you use Vuforia, or
was it?
what are you using for that image recognition?
We can
Okay.
talk later on that one. I'm on the science storytelling side, and
Okay.
that's like a good lead up into the next part. Is, you know, on top of all the technology platforms, innovation we need to get it to work, it's that content generation, telling the stories in this medium in ways that we want to understand it, right? Like as cool as those games are, and as, you know, like Pokemon Go, like that revolutionized, it showed the power of what AR can be in your life. But finding ways to take that technology and actually make it useful, to tell stories we want to tell, to make it so that way that seamless interchange of the stories that we have, the scientists' like lectures and ideas and space exploration can come to you in a way that you want, or you're able to take it in and have a seamless connection through the storytelling technology, is I think what's going to lead to good adoption of AR when it works with the technology we have in our pocket and stories that we want to learn. So it's those kind of things coming together that will, I think, make it happen.
So in terms of AR technologies, you know, I thought Google Glass as a concept was pretty cool, but it's gone. I mean, it's you know, taken off the market. And was it, you know, ahead of its time too much? Was there just not enough content to give somebody an augmented reality experience? I mean, now, I mean, with all kinds of different shopping experiences, I can imagine, or museum experiences or travel experiences, having a pair of glasses that as I'm wandering about in the real world and looking at things and gazing at things, information is popping up, historical information or content or other pictures or images or things like that. What's the future look like for augmented reality literally being part of our reality, that it's sort of a seamless part of our everyday experience as opposed to something we do for entertainment or fun? How far away are we from that kind of environment? You want to start?
Okay. 5 to 10 years, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And it's dependent on several things. It is highly dependent on content. I mean, you imagine the types of content that need to be present where something like this can be completely interwoven into your daily life. And so it's not just as simple as checking emails, checking texts, and doing stuff simplistically on our cell phones today. It's ubiquitous things, like as I'm staring out into the room, should I have the ability to kind of see everyone's background with little pop-ups? This gentleman back here works for SRI. The gentleman over there, this lady over here works for HP and does so-and-so. I'm not sure if that's another application, but I'm just thinking out loud here. Imagine the types of things that Google envisioned when Google Glass came out. One of the reasons why Google Glass didn't necessarily catch on quickly was cost was one. The second issue was ubiquitous content, where it actually would revolutionize someone's life. And so anyway, my answer is going back to that, content-based. We have to develop robust content that is seamless, that is not intrusive necessarily, but acts as kind of an analog into your daily life. But then hardware. And so where are wearables headed? Could we envision the day where we have a contact lens, and that contact lens is essentially your AR device? Or are we envisioning things where we go back to the realm of glasses or cell phones or iPads, and the list goes on and on and on. But what technology or what hardware marries with our biological self to produce an AR vision? And so hardware is definitely, there's a lot of research being conducted already. It's kind of scary what type of research is being done, and it's actually very, very disjoint, like you said. Hundreds of different projects, no standardization at all. But we'll see where it ends up. But 5 to 10 years, something's going to happen.
I always think about who's going to be the alpha tester for the brain implants. Like, not it, not it. Yeah, just to add on to that, I give a lot of talks around hardware and inputs and how they evolved over time. And there's a set of axioms that you can tie to basically any sort of hardware explosion. It has to be cheap enough. It has to be reliable enough. It has to have software that supports the top use cases. I wouldn't even call it content, just the maps and phones go hand in hand, for example, literally. But also it has to have an acceptable error rate. And I think this is sort of understated when it comes to why hardware works well. If you have the greatest experience in the world, but it doesn't work half the time, you are going to be frustrated and stop using it. That was a huge challenge for Google Glass, aside from the content. So I think once we get to that stage where you can have augmented wearables that are reliable, consistent, have some major use case, it could be LinkedIn for AR, of course, then we will see that taking off. But it has to be cheap and have a minimum error rate.
And it needs to be also discreet. I mean,
yes.
that's a very important, that's one of the reasons.
I'm going to push back on that for a second, because I check my phone all freaking time now, man. And in like 2003, people would be on their phones, and everyone's like, oh, so rude. That person's crazy. And now, we're all on our phones constantly, and it's no big deal. So I think there's a socialization aspect. But, I mean, maybe discreet if I'm literally checking your LinkedIn while I'm looking at you, yes.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. Fair.
So what societal implications are there? What type of common decency implications are there?
Yeah, I do this now where I check my watch and I'm like checking my notifications, but people think I'm being rude and like want to leave, So,
Right.
yeah.
But safety is a big concern as well. And so there have been studies. In fact, while I was at Oculus, there were several studies that was tangentially I've seen there, but based on the health effects of wearing a headset for extended periods of time. So how do we extrapolate that to an AR device that you wear all the time?
Yeah, Oculus is supposed to be 13 and older, and I totally stuck my niece and nephew in at 7, and I'm like, I hope this doesn't come back to bite me in the ass later, but worth it.
So for those of you developing these environments, in terms of the underlying technology that is enabling, certainly the GPU is one of the key underlying enabling technologies. Without the GPU, we wouldn't have fast visualization capabilities, et cetera. Obviously, there's things like display technology. Can we miniaturize to contact lens size, et cetera? Are there any other things from your perspective, from a technology, an underlying technology point of view, that you think are kind of the next level of requirement that allows us to achieve either that robustness or the cost point, or what's that?
That's right,
Batteries is a good,
Thermals things,
What other examples are there?
This is your field.
I think better sensors around more minute movements as well, right? Batteries is huge, by the way. That's probably much bigger than a lot of people think. But right now, the controls are bulky. I like physical buttons, but we need to kind of next step it in terms of how people can interact. There's some really interesting work right now going at some companies that have multiple different sensors. They call it transmodal sensors or inputs, where you can sort of infer intent by movement and like the trajectory of the hand combined with eye gaze. But that needs to be, again, ubiquitous. It can't just be on a per platform basis.
I completely agreed. I would also say, in addition to what Bill just said now, is raw computing power. Both from a CPU and GPU perspective, and immense amounts. And so this may be sacrilege, but I envision the day where we actually deviate from Moore's law, and the slope goes even higher. And so, yeah.
Crazy.
You heard it here
crazy
first.
talk. Yeah, you're hearing crazy talk tonight.
I hope so, though.
Because with high amounts of CPU and GPU capability, you can, at that point, imagination is our only limiting factor. So imagine if we saw the Mars experience that Franck just showed, or the ISS experience, but not in CGI, in actual real images. Being able to traverse the actual ISS as it appears to astronauts in real-life images in a 3D, 360 fashion. That requires immense amount of computing power, immense amount of GPU power. It also requires excellent camera technology, which is not present yet either.
Yeah.
But even with that camera technology, you need immense CPU and GPU power to stitch those images together in a seamless way. And so one of the limiting things that I encounter every day is the ability to accomplish tasks that we want to accomplish, but we can't given computing limitations.
Yeah, I go to SIGGRAPH every year, and every year they have, like Disney gives talks, and they'll be like, this is how much Tangled took, 10 million gigabytes, and then this is how much, the next movie, and the next movie. And it's clear when it comes to rendering and photorealism, we're getting pretty freaking close.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just raw compute power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge issue there with adoption too. Like even once the computers and all that can make it possible, until you find a way to make it like the content and availability for everyone, it's just a few creators making it for a few users who are at the very top. And so that's the beauty of having AR on their phone, because a lot of people have that in their pocket already in many Western countries especially. And I even find with this one, like it works really great with the latest phones who have the latest AR kits, but a few phones, few of the generations older phones, and the AR kits just are not working as great as we'd like. And so find a way to not only have technology possible, but have it cheap and wide enough and have the content that enough people want to use it, that it drives more content and more productivity is a key part of the getting those technologies there.
Speaking of cheap, speaking of cheap electronics, when it comes to spatial computing, when we all do have wearables, I think we're going to need to really broaden the types of inputs we have. We have standardized trackpads, we have standardized mice, we have some amount of styluses. But in the future, when your computer is a sort of an environment that surrounds you, people will want to interact with it in different ways, and we'll need to have things that are much more customizable. So it's kind of lucky we live in an era of cheap electronics, but I anticipate that's going to be a new change in computing as well.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we think also the VR experience as being primarily visual.
Right.
There's also the tactile things. We've got these hand controllers
right,
now,
haptics.
but Amresh, you were talking about yesterday this notion of more of a glove that also has, tactile sensation capability, has feedback.
Yeah.
So a lot
there's strong correlation with biology and neurobiology. And so essentially what VR is doing, it's essentially we're hacking our brain. We're hacking the visual cortex to believe that you're actually somewhere else and viewing something else than that you truly are. And so, but vision is just one of our many, many senses, right? And so will we come to a day where we kind of hack other senses besides vision? So we do vision now and a tiny bit of auditory, a tiny bit of hearing. Some of the VR experiences have spatialized audio, and the ISS simulation does as well. So if you hear a vent fan behind you, it'll be behind you. And so haptics. Yeah, so haptics is probably the next realm of addition to what senses we're going to hack. And so there's quite a few companies out there. There's probably too many if you ask me, but they're all working on various things. Some are gloves that have fibers that constrict certain fingers depending on what you're picking up in the virtual world. Some use air pressure to give you tactile sensation. Some use vibrating controllers. Some of these controllers do that already. But interesting, that's also, I think, in the realm of 5 to 10 years. And Bill, we have a question from the audience. Are we taking those later?
Yeah, no, I think it's time. We ran over a little bit because we started a little bit late. I wanted to get the audience up here.
In the front row.
We have a microphone up here. If you do have a question, please feel free to come forward and step by the microphone and speak directly into it and move it as you need to. But love to have your questions. And while anybody's brave enough to come up and do that, the other thing besides this tactile feedback element is just maybe also the more, speaking of new senses, I am looking forward to like virtual dining experiences where I can get all the incredible tastes with none of the calories. I mean, that would be totally awesome. But in mundane applications, one of the great things that I still think about even though it was many years ago that I read Snow Crash, was the environment that the hero found himself in a lot, and his name in the book was actually Hero, protagonist, where he would go to meetings with people from other parts of the world, but with a virtual reality experience, it made it seem like they were sitting right across the table. I was probably reading that book at the time when I was sitting on airplanes going to places like Singapore and Germany and so on, and thinking, wouldn't that be nice to just put on a headset and be in that meeting? I don't know if these more mundane, if you will, VR experiences are in our future, or even something people think about.
There are companies that are working right now on spatial capture, so you can that's live streamed, so you can really be in the same space with other people. It's happening.
I think that's going to be fun. All right, why don't we go ahead with some audience questions?
Hi, I'm Jeff Claiborne with SRI.
Is this? Can we get this mic on? Just tap it and see if it's
Check, check. Hello?
Yeah,
Yeah.
here we go.
It's working. So what types of AR, VR related ethical questions trouble you the most, and what do you propose we do about them?
Good question.
Well,
So
great question.
there's this thought experiment that I've been arguing with my friends about lately, which is a lot of computer vision relies on recognition of objects, right? So you have an image library or object library, and you're like, okay, now I know that this is a water bottle, but I also know that it's Arrowhead brand water bottle, right? So once you have recognized the object, you can create an event for the object. You can say, okay, once you see an Arrowhead water bottle, play the Arrowhead water bottle song or something, which is annoying. Please don't do that with Arrowhead. But you can have anything you want to have happen after that. It's really easy. This is the basics of computer programming. You see something, you do something, if then. What if I decided every time I saw an Arrowhead water bottle, I was going to change the logo to Dasani? That's an option. You can do that just as easily as anything else. And so there's a lot of questions, and this is very simple. This is just a water bottle, and it's IP. But what if every time someone saw your face or your car or something about you, they could change something there? And there's really no legal precedent in place for this right now. This is something I think that will become an interesting IP and like series of lawsuits in the future, and I very much look forward to seeing the fallout. But when you think about anything being a trigger, because the computer is now seeing everything about the world and choosing to react to it, who owns not the logo itself, but that instancing of the logo or your face or whatever it is?
Any other thoughts on that?
Sure. One of my biggest concerns is, well, two. One is health implications. And so due to the current work that I'm doing at a VR startup, I have to spend a lot of time on VR-related forums. And I hear stories of people spending several hours, like 20 hours in a VR headset.
So sweaty.
For gaming tournaments. And then they describe the VR hangover effect the next day. So it's truly playing games biologically to your vestibular system, to your visual cortex. And I'm not sure long-term what implications that may have, because we've never done that before. We've never really hacked our visual cortex for that extended period of time and fully immersed ourselves in an alternate reality. And so I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it's a new incarnation of the movie Inception. I'm not sure what that means. So that's one concern. The second concern is more around privacy laws. And so AR has the potential of, like we discussed before, having implications on people's privacy. And so that's another major concern.
Just to jump on that quickly, too, we think a lot about sort of natural acknowledgement of things. So for one example we had is you buy a game, you buy Exploding Kittens at the store, and Exploding Kittens has an AR component. And by buying it, by walking out of the store with it, you're kind of giving consent that the AR experience will continue when you get to your house, which is a private space. But does that also go into the bedroom? Like, what did you have to go in your house and scan everything until the computer, like, this is private, this is extra private? And how does that work with things like, your YouTube app or your email app, for example? And humans aren't used to having to explicitly define all of these things, right? We're used to just sort of being around and we'll not use things somewhere. So this is going to be a really interesting social change as well.
But if you believe Elon Musk, we're already in a simulation. And so we're just going one level below our current simulation with VR and AR. So no big deal.
If this is a simulation, where are my dinosaurs?
All right. So I'm afraid I've just been reminded that actually with SRI and the use of the auditorium, we have to vacate the space at this point. So
Oh, no.
I'm sorry we didn't get to a couple of other questions, but I'm sure you can have the opportunity as we're all kind of exiting here to approach the speakers tonight and ask them your questions. I do thank you all very much for coming. I hope you'll join us again for our August talk, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much.